Oh, hey everyone. So I thought today we would do something a little bit different, something that I've never done before. Um, Today I thought we would talk about a very incredible group from my childhood, the Wiggles. And most of you would remember, the Wiggles from your childhood too. But a little fact about the Wiggles is some of you people might not know they were actually another group called the Cockroaches, and that was the band that Anthony and Jeff were in originally. I think might have been the late '80s. Yeah, it would have been late '80s. And Greg, who was the original Yellow Wiggle, he did work experience for them as a roadie and a sound engineer. And yeah, so that's how Greg got to meet Anthony and Jeff. And then one day, Anthony pulled Greg aside and said, um, Greg, you're young. What do you want to do when you're older? And he said, well, I want to be a roadie. And Anthony's like, well, you can't really be a roadie when you're 50. I mean, you can be, but you're going to have a sore back from lugging gear, and you don't want to carry gear up and down stairs every day. And to be fair, Anthony, he was probably right because, being a roadie can take a toll on your back, when you carry gear up and down stairs every day. But luckily, he said to Greg back then, what else would you want to do? And he said, well, look, if there's something else, I could do, I'd probably be a teacher because that way you can use music in the classroom. But yeah, then Anthony's like, on his recommendation, he actually said, why don't you think about doing early childhood teaching? And I think at first, Greg obviously hadn't thought about that. He thought about becoming a primary teacher, but I think the thing is with primary teaching, there's a lot of structure and learning, and it is that way. But when you do early childhood, it's basically a child exploring art through play. So yeah, and I think Anthony said there was about 300 women and 5 men there, and this was at, I think, Macquarie University. So one of the main unis in Sydney, and yeah, that's what sold Greg on that opportunity. So Greg went there with Anthony on his recommendation and enrolled, and I think that's where they met Murray as well, who also ended up being in the Wiggles. Like he was studying early childhood teaching as well. And Anthony and Murray, like they were both started second year at the same time. And I think this is a pretty funny part of the story, but I think Murray had just gotten married, and Anthony's first response was like, "Why are you getting married for? There's all these girls here." But yeah, no, I'm sure that would have been just a funny joke. But anywho, yeah, and then they met. Yeah, so Greg met Murray at Macquarie Uni, and they did. Murray and Anthony were 2 years ahead of Greg, and over one summer, Anthony rang Greg and said, "Look, I want to get together, write and record some songs for kids and see what we can do with that." And yeah, that's where that all began. And I actually have something right here for you guys. This is the very first album that was released in 1991, the year the Wiggles began. So this was released, I think, in 1991. You can see it at this stage. There's no coloured skivvies yet, and they had a fifth member at the time, a guy named Philip Wiltshire, who worked in the music department where Greg and Murray was and Anthony was studying early childhood. And Philip was actually a very classical player. He did a few piano pieces. He played the trumpet. So I think back in around that time they would have had Greg on vocals, Murray on guitar, Anthony on drums, and then Philip on the brass and piano. Then they remembered how good Jeff was on his keyboard, and Anthony rang Jeff and said, "Would you like to come down to the studio and record some children's songs?" And I'm pretty sure Jeff was in the middle of renovating his house, and Jeff's first response was like, how long is it going to take? And he's like, oh, only a few hours. And I'm pretty sure Jeff asked that question because he just wanted to get out of the studio as fast as possible to get back to his renovations. um, yeah, so Jeff came down and plugged his keyboard in and recorded some songs. And I'm pretty sure Rockabye Bear was the first song they wrote. And because I think, well, yeah, they did Rockabye Bear, then they did Get Ready to Wiggle, which was actually the song where the Wiggles had got their name. Because it's kind of an idea the way our kids dance, they kind of wiggle around. And they actually had another song on there that was originally a Cockroaches song. The Cockroaches song was called "It's Another Saturday Night," but what they did with that song, they actually changed it, like re-recorded it into a song for kids, and is now known as Dorothy the Dinosaur. And because I think in the earlier days they had a meeting when they all got together and they came up with an idea and said, "Oh, we need a character for the children to relate to." And so I think Murray came up with Dorothy the Dinosaur because he saw how fascinated, children are with dinosaurs, but he wanted this kind of friendly dinosaur. And yeah, I think his wife Meg made the first suit, and I think because obviously the costume nowadays, like I mean, with technology and and costume making, like that they have improved over the years. But back in that time, everything was still old fashioned, and yeah, like I said, Murray's wife Meg made the first suit, and the suit was very different to what they have now. But they knew from research that children are centered thinkers. So all you had to do was center on the head, and then that was true. Like children didn't say, "Oh, there's a man," or "There's a woman in there," like "There's the dinosaur." But yeah. And a little fun fact about those shirts on the first album, like before the Skivvies, that's what the Cockroaches originally had at that time, and so the Wiggles decided to copy that. But then later, their manager said, "Oh, how about you guys change your look for the next CD?" And I think they had a chat about a day before their photo shoot for the cover. And Anthony's like, "I've got it, guys. Just wear black pants and a solid color on top. We'll all have a different color on top." Jeff had a purple skivvy at home, and Murray already had a red one. So it was kind of set from that point that Jeff would be purple, Murray would be red. But Anthony and Greg didn't have anything to fit the description. So they went out to an old um, Grace Brothers store in Chatswood, and in the menswear department was a blue skivvy hanging up. So, and they both saw it, and blue's actually Greg's favourite colour. So they both ran for the blue skivvy, and Anthony was a quicker runner on the day. But right next to that was a yellow skivvy, so Greg just took that one. So there was, pretty much a race to the bargain bin table. Whoever got the blue first or whoever got the yellow first. But I'm pretty sure Anthony's reaction, like from his memory, is that when Greg got yellow, they were all glad because Anthony didn't want to end up with the yellow skivvy, which I thought was pretty funny, by the way. But like I'm kind of glad Greg ended up with the yellow too, because there's actually a biography that I have about him called Now and Then that was released maybe 15 years ago now, and there's a picture in of him in 1975, a young boy in a yellow skivvy, and that was even before he even wore the yellow skivvy. So it's like it was meant to be, like. And it's pretty funny also when Greg was in, I think it was primary school. Yeah, their winter uniform was a yellow skivvy. So it's like it was all meant to be, like wearing a yellow skivvy in primary school and then wearing one when you were little. But yeah, I'll just quickly go to the second album. This one here is called Here Comes a Song. This was released in 1992. You can see how they've got their coloured skivvies. Philip's not there. He left not long after the first album, but Yeah, so these were the five Wiggles became four, and then they included Dorothy on the album cover, which I thought was a nice touch. But a little fact about the Skivvies again is that if you actually go back and watch some of their earlier, I would say DVDs, but back then they were called VHS, so Video Home System is what it stand for. And, we're talking like over 20, 30 years ago when we had old videotapes. Yeah, if you look back at some of their earlier videos, you can see Anthony wearing a green like skivvy or a green shirt because I think for a long time he actually couldn't find his blue one, so he just turned up in whatever colour shirt he had. And I believe those videos were Wiggle Time 1993 because I remember watching that all the time. Then there was Yummy Yummy where he kind of had the blue again. It was kind of a blue turquoise slash green color. Yeah, so I think 1994 it was back to normal. I wouldn't say normal, but it was accurate to the color he originally chose. And then I think Big Red Car 1995 he wore like a green skivvy again and had his hair was a bit longer. And then I think when Wake Up Jeff 1996 came around, Anthony was back to blue. So yeah, and I think I'm pretty sure it was also Yummy Yummy. It was a song called Henry's Dance where Anthony was wearing a grey skivvy because the background they were shooting on was like a blue background. And the thing is, if he had worn that colour, it would have disappeared into the background footage. So blue, green, and grey were Anthony's three colours, but original was blue, as you would have seen on the album. But yeah, over time, as the Wiggles got bigger, they were actually very fortunate enough to have had some pretty big guests come along meeting the Wiggles, whether it be at a show or it would be like for a cameo or a DVD or video appearance. Like the Wiggles had so many incredible guests, like wanting to come and meet them, and they were big celebrities too. Like I'm pretty sure Jerry Seinfeld came along. Robert De Niro, I remember talking about Robert De Niro with Greg actually, because I think this would have been early 2000s. Robert actually reached out to them because they were touring, I think New York at the time, or Madison Square Garden. I think it was that one. And Robert actually reached out because I think he had a 2-year-old son at the time, and I think so. This would have been maybe 26 years ago, and I think his son's around my age or maybe a little bit older. I'm not sure, but his manager reached out to the Wiggles and said, "Oh, like Robert De Niro wants to come to your show, like wants to meet you," and that would have been a really like um, probably one of the biggest guests to ever like meet them in person. But yeah, so and I think Robert might have been running late to the show, and uh, his PA was ringing their tour managers like, "Oh, we're still not there." I think they might have met him after the show because the thing is, whenever they had shows on, I think the show wouldn't start on the actual time. They'd usually give about 10, 15 minutes to let people find a park. But yeah, I think with Robert De Niro, he was like they said he was a really incredible guy. He's one of the most recognizable actors. He's been in so many big films. But another one who I actually thought was super cool from my childhood was when they got to meet the late Steve Irwin. And as you can see here, they actually got to record an album with him called Wiggly Safari, which was one of my favorite albums from my childhood. I had it on VHS. I have the DVD in here somewhere. If I find it, I'll let you know. But yeah, Steve Irwin was a big part of my childhood as well. But this is about the Wiggles. And as you can see, I've got a shirt here that I actually got from the reunion tour, and I'm sure you guys probably have heard before. The Wiggles do get back together every now and then, because even though there is a new lineup of Wiggles for children nowadays, but every now and then the original guys will get back together on stage for a reunion for adults because us adults we grew up with the original guys, so it would make sense for to include adults for the reunion shows, and I've been to two of them, and that they are very fun to do. So, fingers crossed they'll do another one for the 35th anniversary, which I think is this year. And also over here, I've even got a vinyl called Hot Potato, Best of the OG Wiggles. You can see over here I've got some signatures because I actually I have a connection to these guys now, and something I never thought would ever happen. Life can be full of surprises, but you see we've got Murray's signature here, got Anthony's here, got Jeff's here, and just got one missing, and that's Greg. But hopefully we'll be able to cross paths again soon, and I'll have it signed by all the four OGs. But like going back to how it all began, like there's something really interesting that I didn't actually know till many years later. But and another thing I'm going to put out there is, if you guys are like, if most of you probably wouldn't even know either that there's a documentary called Hot Potato: The Story of the Wiggles, and again it takes you into the backstory, and I've basically explained most of it before. But if you'd like to know more about the OG Wiggles, I recommend, if you have Prime, it's or Amazon Prime or Prime Video, the documentary is on there. So if you guys ever want to give it a watch, I would highly recommend it. It's my favorite documentary in the world, like one of the best. That was very well put together, in my opinion. And there was heaps of footage in there that I actually had never seen before, so it was really interesting for me to having to look back at some of that old footage, and like possibly reliving the childhood, sort of. But the Wiggles, like they're such incredible guys, and I'll be forever grateful that they're able to put some music out there, and that would stay with us in a child, for be there as a lifetime. And it's been an incredible journey, growing up with them, and I'm sure they've had an amazing journey with us too. But and like the fact that they were around, like, I mean, the Wiggles are still going today, 35 years, and like there's a new lineup and everything. I got to give a shout out to Anthony, who's kept this going. If I could see him right now, I'd probably say, Anthony, you've done a great job keeping the group together, and I'm glad that the Wiggles are still performing for kids. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed like today's episode of my knowledge on the Wiggles. Have a great day, and I'll see you next time for another episode of Ben's World. Hi everyone, Ben here from Ben's World. Come live in it. Thank you for tuning in each fortnight. I hope you enjoy the latest episode. Feel free to like and subscribe, and if you have any questions, please comment below, as I would love to hear your feedback. Have a great day, and remember, it's Ben's World. Come live in it.